Two pilgrims asked an ascetic, to what extent are we held responsible by God for the sinful thoughts that attack our nous? Now, here we can translate the word nous as mind. That's one way of translating it. So, to what degree are we responsible, right? If I have sinful thoughts, is that a sin? Did I just commit a sin because I have sinful thoughts? And the elder replied with a beautiful allegory. This is St. Paisius speaking. Airplanes pass above here where I live. I cannot hinder the airplanes, so I'm not responsible for that. I would be responsible if I began to build an airport. The acceptance of sinful thoughts, which is consent, can be compared to building the airport. So, day in, day out, we are inundated with all sorts of thoughts, and the demons use our thoughts, use our mind as a major part in which they throw temptations at us to fall into sin. And so those tempting thoughts are not necessarily, our fault per se, right? Most of the time, it's the demons that are projecting those thoughts at us. And so we're not going to be held responsible before God for having those thoughts per se, but we will be responsible by God if we acted on those thoughts, if we participated in those thoughts, if we played around with those thoughts, if we entertained those thoughts, if we gave them attention and we focused on them and we, um, you know, gave our heart over to them, right? Um, in other words, if we give our consent to those thoughts, if we act on them, and so forth. Elder Ephraim, and there's many other saints that will say this. They'll say that most of the time, temptations begin in our thoughts. That's usually how and where and when the temptations begin is in our thoughts, which is why we need to pay close attention to our thoughts. Let me say it again. We need to pay close attention to our thoughts because it's in our thoughts, primarily, by and large, that temptations are coming at us, that we will encounter them. And if we're not paying attention, if we're not vigilant, if we're not heedful, if we don't live an attentive life, we will fall into those temptations. We will give consent to them and we will fall over and over and over and over again. And we'll have many problems in our spiritual life. So we have to be paying close attention to their thoughts and not just paying attention to the thoughts, but also what are we going to do, right? What's our reaction to those thoughts? You can try to ignore them. That's one way. The saints will say, try to ignore the temptations. Like I read a beautiful quote from Saint Porphyrios today. He said, you don't fight evil by like facing it head on. He says, just turn your direction to Christ, turn to Christ, and He'll take care of it. In other words, say the Jesus prayer, right? When you have a tempting thought to sin, instead of trying to battle it out directly, like trying to rationalize your way through it and try to debate the thoughts and this kind of an approach. Saints recommend that for us who are beginners in spiritual life, we just retreat. We retreat and we say the Jesus prayer and we retreat back to Christ. And that's our armor. That's our weapon, is the Jesus prayer. So we have to pay attention to our thoughts. And when we notice the sinful thoughts, what do? Right? We should not let them land and allow them to land in our heart like airplanes, like St. Paisius says, by paying attention and play around with them, but we should instead shoo them away by saying the Jesus prayer. Shoo them away.